Thank you for joining us today. My name is Dan Hartledge, and I serve as president of the Louisville Forum. We meet on the second Wednesday of every month here at Vincenzo's Restaurant in downtown Louisville. The Louisville Forum is a nonpartisan public issues group founded in 1984. The Forum hosts debates and discussions of contemporary and sometimes controversial public policy issues that affect the greater Louisville area. Although we may take up issues that have a national interest, we do try to highlight it from a local perspective. For more information on the Louisville Forum, on our programs, or to make a reservation for a future program, please visit our website at louisvilleforum.org. So today's topic offers a little something for all of us to chew on. A possible restaurant tax for the city of Louisville. It's an issue that has been batted around among members of local government and state government for a lot of times, many times over the years, but the conversation has sort of intensified over the last year or so. This year, Louisville is facing a 12% increase in pension payments to the state. Couple that on top of a similar 12% phase-in of payments during the last 2 years. Louisville Metro government had to make $25 million in cuts last year. Another shortfall is expected this coming year. And in the eyes of some, a restaurant tax may be one of the best solutions. Louisville's chief financial officer says a restaurant tax could generate up to $30 million in new revenue. Others, including some with Metro Council, have said it could be as high as $40 million. Mayor Fisher seems to want it. Many members of Metro Council are pushing for it and have pushed for it in the past. Many who favor shoring up the city's budget gap with this tax say there are few alternatives and that the impact on individuals dining out would be nominal. Now, as you might expect, Louisville's restaurant owners and operators, as well as other members of the community who dine out in area restaurants, many of them, they see it another way. Prices at virtually all restaurants would increase, and that includes low-cost venues and some fast food restaurants whose customers include low-income residents, as well as working parents who may be juggling multiple jobs and may rely on such restaurants to feed their families several times a week. Restaurants would suffer, some say, and Louisville's 36,000 restaurant employees would be among those who pay the price. Louisville is known as a thriving and bustling restaurant community, and the restaurants and new jobs related to those restaurants seem to be popping up every day, so some are concerned about a new tax dousing that growth and impacting everyone who works at or dines at a restaurant. So today we have two individuals who are very visible on the subject. Our panelists are Stacy Roof, President and CEO of the Kentucky Restaurant Association, and Brent Ackerson, Louisville's 26th District Metro Councilman. We'll start with Stacy. Stacy joined the Kentucky Restaurant Association in 1995 and has been its president since 2000. Stacy earned a BA from University of Louisville and has extensive experience in working for small businesses as well as large corporations. She has served on the Council of State Restaurant Association's Board of Directors. She currently serves on U of L's School of Public Health and Information Sciences Community Advisory Board. For a lot of years now, Stacy and the association have played an important role in helping restaurants succeed. The KRA is a nonprofit organization that represents and works with a wide variety of Kentucky food service operations. The KRA provides support to its members in such areas as hiring practices, training, general business operations, health and safety, and, of course, legislative issues. So, will you please welcome first Stacy Roof.
Good morning. Well, afternoon, I guess now. Thank you for the introduction, Dan, and thank you for the invitation to speak about a potential restaurant tax in Louisville. Let me give you a brief description of all the restaurant tax ideas that are floating around right now. There is an ordinance in Louisville that would be a 0.25% restaurant tax, and you may have remembered seeing this several weeks ago in the news, a couple months ago, where it would also have a fee attached to ticket sales, right? So that's a Louisville-specific ordinance that would come out as from the city council, right, and be voted on there, that would just be effective here in the city, and I believe it is resting in the budget committee at this point in time. There are actually two bills in Frankfurt right now that would specifically mention or have a restaurant tax. First is House Bill 470. 470 is just a restaurant tax bill. It would allow any class city to have an up to 3% restaurant tax, meaning that the restaurant isn't taxed per se, but every meal that's purchased away from home would be taxed, whether it's a rotisserie chicken at a grocery store or a hot dog at a gas station or a ball game. Really, that language would come into play when the cities draft their ordinances, right, what that would all apply to. So 470 is restaurant tax specific, and I've got copies of these bills and the language up here if anybody cares to see them later. Interesting thing about 470 is that it removes the definition of a restaurant, which prior to this or now is having 50-plus seats. So that then, I guess, would be up to the cities to craft what they call a restaurant. Would that be, you know, a smaller number of seats or what have you? So that's House Bill 470. Then there's House Bill 475, which to me is more problematic and has had a lot of legs, had a lot of interest, has many co-sponsors, I think 50 co-sponsors signed on. It came up in the House for a full vote last Friday, but there was kind of a political spat, so it didn't get voted forward, but we're told it will come back in some format or another. That language isn't going anywhere. But the worrisome thing to us is that restaurants are specifically named, but it would just broaden what counties and cities are allowed to tax, okay? So the language is very, very broad at this point in time. So if it does get passed by the House, the Senate, the governor signs it, it goes on the ballot, the citizens say, yes, we'd like to see that, it goes back to the General Assembly for the language to be crafted, and then gets handed to the cities as here's what you have to work with in those parameters, okay? So that's a big thing, right? Those are cities and counties that would be able to do that. So with all that in mind, my background, or my why I'm here, I guess, as the CEO of the Kentucky Restaurant Association, also as a taxpayer, I live here in Louisville, and a mother with 3 active teenagers. And so believe me, we pay a lot of taxes and eat our share of meals away from home. As the Louisville Children's Meal Ordinance that took place, that was put into effect last year, states, families in Louisville have limited time to obtain and prepare food, making dining out an appealing and not often necessary option, okay? A lot of people think that dining out is strictly luxury, and it has not been that way for a long time. We're busy people. It's part of our fabric and part of our culture. And frankly, it's part of the community and part of the way that we, I think in Louisville especially and in Kentucky, it's part of our entertainment. Mayor Fisher signed that ordinance into law last year. We believe that a restaurant tax is really a tax on families, and the association believes restaurants should not be singled out to collect more taxes for a city that has a budget surplus and that didn't prepare for a rainy day. Mayor Fisher has called a restaurant tax low-hanging fruit and an easy fix for the city's budget woes and for the pension crisis. Friends, easy does not mean right, and we heartily believe that easy shouldn't be the simple solution, that something more widespread should take effect. If it's going to look like a tax, then it shouldn't single out our industry. Restaurant tax advocates often say it's the best option we have. I disagree that it's the best option, but it may be what officials consider the largest pot of money with the least resistance. As a citizen here, I point to poor planning on the city's behalf for being in the position to need yet another tax option. There is an $18.9 million surplus, we're told, a couple of weeks ago. And in my house and in my business, obligations are met, cuts are made before any new purchase or commitment is even considered, much less made. Mayor Fisher and the city leaders are quick to praise Louisville restaurants for drawing visitors to the area and for growing here and really supporting the city and generating a lot of tax revenue. We have a vibrant and diverse restaurant scene here, and believe me, we're told time and time again, especially from people that come from larger areas, how wonderful our scene is. We can't have it both ways, though. We can't praise them on one hand and take from them on another. As a city with many neighboring restaurant options close by, in Bullitt County, Oldham County, across the bridge in southern Indiana, we must remain competitive and continue to give diners both diversity and value so they don't stay home rather than paying more. Most restaurants operate with a really small profit margin, 3 to 5%, if they're doing a good job, right? And we know some that maybe that profit margin is smaller, or maybe it's a percentage higher, but it's 3 to 5 is the industry norm. A 3% restaurant tax would be applied to a bill, which sales tax would then be applied to, so the total tax the customer would pay is 9.18%. For my family, I'll just use that as an example because once or twice a week, inevitably, we go through a drive-through or I pick up pizza or something. And with 3 teenagers, 2 of whom are boys, you can imagine that we never have enough food. A $35 quick service trip would equate to, if there's a 3% tax, $1.05 in a restaurant tax, $2.16 in sales tax, for a total of $38.21. If a restaurant tax becomes law, the restaurant would then need to pay somebody to program its ordering system. You know how they're always entering the orders on a computer system of some sort, right? Some even come to your table and do that. Well, that's to communicate to the kitchen what they need to fix and prepare and have ready to go, right? Those all have to be programmed, so when you get your printed out receipt, it itemizes, right? And you can see what you paid in tax. You can see what each meal cost. The restaurant tax would have to be programmed into that as well. The bookkeeper or the outside accounting company for the restaurant would track the tax, keep it separate from other funds, and remit it to the city according to the ordinance language. You know, that may change. It may be different in Frankfort than it is in Louisville. That's a lot of record keeping for a pass-through tax. If restaurants or any business could raise prices 3% and keep that money, believe me, they would do it in a heartbeat. There is only so much customers will pay for a burger or a quick lunch or a dinner out. Restaurateurs are trying to figure out how to charge a bit more to offset lost business due to a new tax. When Mayor Fisher and others say 25% or more of our restaurant's guests are tourists, he's wrong. Ask any of our restaurants and they will tell you. Most restaurants say, and we did an internal poll a couple months ago, I guess, that 92% or more of their guests are regular diners who live locally. Restaurant owners rely on building relationships with their regulars and with locals for those routine repeat visits to help them survive. If it weren't for them, there would be no place for a tourist to visit. According to Mayor Fisher's homepage at louisvilleky.gov, a restaurant tax would raise, it says on the homepage, $20 million. Dan, you referenced 30 or 40 million, and we've seen all of those numbers. We know that Louisville diners will contribute to this. Restaurants will contribute by ultimately sharing the revenue, but the group that our policymakers seem to ignore is restaurant employees, which represent the highest private employment sector really in the city. A study by the University of Kentucky in 2013 showed that a 3% restaurant tax in first and second class cities would result in diners making alternative choices, such as going out less to eat, ordering value items, eating less at local establishments, or just not going out for a while. Knowing this fact, we can make the obvious conclusion that restaurants will bring in less revenue. Less revenue would mean a loss of hours, lower wages for employees, and this is an extremely competitive industry that already works on razor-thin margins, which we talked about before. If this costs each of the 40,000 or so employees only $10 a week, and that's a very conservative estimate, that would mean the cost to restaurant workers would be $20 million, which happens to be the amount that Mayor Fisher has on record that he thinks a restaurant tax would raise. Does anyone realistically think that the budget woes, which are caused by the cost of government pension issues, should be on the backs of restaurant employees that often don't have retirement savings, health insurance, or higher wages? Restaurant business is strongest when consumer confidence is high. Consumers make decisions and are influenced in many ways from weather coverage, right? If there might be snow, what do? We run to the store, we get everything from milk and bread to now the new thing is toilet paper, right? We got to have all the toilet paper that the city sells, right? So weather coverage is a big factor, from day to day even. Viewers will alter their plans on that. Increased taxes and fees also have an impact on that. State and federal officials telling consumers to stay home to avoid coronavirus, which is the issue of the day, right? Newspaper articles, even well-intentioned ones, and I've been told, and this just happened to me a couple days ago, no, the title of the article is going to be why you should go out. Like, it's still feeding the hysteria that people have that they can't go out of their house, you know. They dwell on health and financial issues. We have all been inundated with coronavirus updates and advice. Businesses will pay a price. It's not if they will, it is when they will and to what degree that price tag is. They're worried. They've been trying to plan, but they've also been trying to do what they do best and be hospitable. That's the business that we're in. We open our doors. We hope you come. We want your experience to be the best so that we see you once a week instead of once a month. I've been contacted multiple times over the past week from outlets that are filming stories or writing articles, which all contribute to the hype and hysteria. And it makes our customers scared to leave their homes, but especially scared to do things that are fun, you know, that some people would say aren't necessary. But maybe they're a low-income family. Maybe they're a busy family and they're on their way to soccer practice. Maybe they are elderly and, you know, a prepared meal that they purchase away from home is their best option, you know. I hope healthy adults who make purchasing decisions will carry on and support our local restaurants. It's just kind of a blip on the radar screen, but it's big and it's worrisome and we don't know what it's going to look like yet. But for all those reasons, that's our position as the Restaurant Association on a restaurant tax, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Stacy. I appreciate it. And for a moment there, I thought you were advocating a tax on toilet paper.
Maybe we should look at that.
What do you think, Brent?
I'll take whatever I can.
Everybody pays.
Okay, so having said that, our next speaker is Brent Ackerson. And Brent was first elected as the 26th District Councilman in 2008, was reelected in 2012, and again in 2016. He represents neighbors in the Urban Services District, which include Bon Air Estates, Brookhaven, Highgate Springs, Klondike Acres, Melbourne Heights, Middale Estates, Roselawn, among others. He serves as the chair of the Metro Council's Government Oversight and Audit Committee and is a member of the Budget Committee as well. Brent is a native of Louisville, received a Bachelor's of Arts degree at the University of Louisville, and is a graduate of the University of Akron College of Law. Brent presently practices law with the Ackerson Law Office. So please welcome Brent Ackerson.
Thank you all. For those of you all who are in the political know, you know that I'm a trouble causer downtown. I'm self-professed and I enjoy every second of it. I make everyone mad at various times, but because I like to speak my mind. What's interesting today is approximately a year ago this time, I stood at this podium before you all arguing against a tax increase. And today, here I am to talk for taxes. So it's an interesting dynamic. A year ago, I stood before you because I was opposed to the insurance premium tax. One of the things that I think that we agree upon is we should look to cuts first, because no one likes taxes. Very few people in this world like taxes, but taxes are a must. The question is how much to tax and how to properly spend that balance. Because taxes hurt everybody in different ways, because that bill in government has to be paid. So we rejected the insurance premium tax, a tax that at that time I thought would have hurt poor people, would have hurt everyone here. You talk about going out and hurting people's ability to potentially pay for their meal, eating out less because it's going to cost them more. Had we hit them with the insurance premium tax, we'd been in the same boat because we would have been taxing their car insurance, their home insurance. If they were renters, their landlords would have been taxed higher and would have passed that along to their renters for their liability insurance. Small businesses would have been hurt. Those same restaurants would have been hurt by the insurance premium tax. So what we got to come to is we got to come to the conclusion that taxes hurt no matter what. It's painful. So the question then begs is we need to look for the least painful method, a method that potentially can be borne with the least amount of pain, recognizing it will hurt. And the restaurant tax is one of those. My attitude is this: I want as many options as possible because right now our hands are tied. We have too few options in Louisville, and the more options that Frankfort will give us, how great would it be? You choose the best of the worst that you have options-wise right now. If Frankfort gives us more ability, repeal the bad ones and replace it with a better one. That's the smart, forward way to be thinking about the situation. Now, last year when we talked about essentially at that time, we would have generated $60 million in taxes by doubling the insurance premium tax here in Louisville. We rejected that. Instead, we did, I believe, about $24 million in cuts is what initially we talked about $35 million. We got it down to $24 million in cuts, and those hurt. But I was a proponent of we needed to try the cuts first because the cuts would give us a gauge of then how much then to turn in tax to come up with the revenue that we need. We do have, as you've acknowledged, an $18.9 million surplus this year. But forward thinking, someone like myself says, our numbers were off. So we've got $18.9 million. That's maybe at one time if we had, budgeted better or forecasted better, maybe we wouldn't have done $24 million in cuts. Maybe we would have done a lot less. But that's not the case. Having $18.9 million, I know this. The pension bill this year is going up $12.5 million. So with that $18.9 million, if we are smart, we say to ourselves, there is this year's pension bill, and it's going to leave me $6.4 million for next year's, because next year's will be another $12.5 million increase. So I'm halfway, I got this year's problem covered, and I'm halfway to covering next year's problem. Now that's where taxes like the restaurant tax and anything else Frankfort will give us the ability to look at, that's where we're going to be looking to cover those future costs. Because I don't want to see any more cuts. I'd like to restore some things. It's all about math. Right now, we are 50 fewer police officers on the street than we were last year. To replace those 50, I need $3.6 million. That's an even number there that essentially just gets me back up to last year's. So no matter what, I'm going to have to tax you, plain and simple. So the restaurant tax is a great option. I'm not advocating that we tax the full 3%. I think what's interesting is the League of Cities is behind this, advancing it. So you've got Republicans, you've got Democrats, you've got cities across the Commonwealth all agreeing this is a good idea. I've got a son who's getting ready to go to college next year, so we're traveling all over looking at various universities. We were down in New Orleans not too long ago. New Orleans has a 10% restaurant tax. We're not creating something new here. We're turning to other cities and looking to see what they're doing. And it's working there. I'm also looking to say if I'm going to tax people, what I like about the restaurant tax and the Yum Center ticket tax that we are going to be debating potentially this year is, half those ticket sales for the Yum Center come from folks from out of town. And we look at all the conventions that we have, folks coming in from out of town. Here's a chance that all these people that come to Louisville to enjoy the greatness that we have here, for us to charge them a little bit more, for them to help us continue to make Louisville great. Again, I look to other states and other major cities. This is exactly what they're doing. So this is not some sort of, Albert Einstein moment. Really, I'm a copycat. But the greatest thing to copy is great other people's ideas that work for them. The restaurant tax is one that, there's 28 cities presently in Louisville, or in Kentucky, that have the ability to restaurant tax and do. It's working for them. E-Town, you look at all the growth that's happening in E-Town. E-Town they increased their sales tax by more than 7% since 2010. Okay, they started collecting the 2% from 2007 forward. But their sales, the national average of sales have gone up about 5% of restaurants. Now, E-Town, who increased by 2% the restaurant tax, they're doing, according to the numbers that I was shown by the League of Cities, essentially their restaurant sales increased by 7%. 2% more than the national average, and they have the tax. It's not shutting people down. So it's something that we shouldn't be fearful of. It's something that we need to consider, plain and simple. The more options that come our way, the more that we're going to look to cover the bills that we've got to cover. But no matter what, I've got bills I've got to pay. You, the community, demand certain things of your government. And the only way that's going to be paid for is by various taxes. And so the restaurant tax is one where most people choose versus the insurance premium tax. Not a choice there. I mean, the end result is they got a car, they got a home, they got an apartment. Small businesses have to have liability insurance, premises liability, and things like that. Those aren't choices. Those are forced upon people. This is a situation where people have the option. Much like the car rental tax that we'll be discussing this year. I know that's not favorable by some of the folks here in this room, but you choose to do those things. And when you're choosing to participate in the system, it's a much better system of who's paying for what. The question is poor family is not going out to dinner that often. They're eating a bologna sandwich. You know, the folks who are going out, myself and a lot of you all here today, for what you paid for your meal. You know, a 1%, 2%, or 3% increase upon that is not something incredibly onerous. For Metro Council, right now, we do have the ability to tax a 1/4% that was discussed. So think about that. The numbers that I've been told is that 1/4% tax would generate roughly $1 million a year. It's not a major number, but it's $1 million towards the 3.6 that I need to put 50 more officers on the street to restore our police force to last year's capacity. So you say 1/4%. That boils down to this. If we went out to dinner, if I went out to dinner and my bill was $100 today, and I passed that restaurant tax with the 1/4% tomorrow, on Friday when I went out and spent that $100 bill would no longer be $100, it'd be at $100.25. That's not going to deter me or anyone else. But at the same time, that's $1 million more towards fixing the hole that I've got. And so at the end of the day, it's all about the math. I've got bills to pay as your government, and I've got to come up with that money some way. You know, I can continue to cut, but at what point do I just gut you? At what point do you say Louisville isn't a nice place to live anymore? And so we've got to prioritize those things, and I need as many options as possible, and I need the restaurant industry to participate with me. Because when Louisville wins, you know, the restaurants still win also. And so just give me as many options as possible. I would love to be one of the first politicians in a long time to repeal a tax, to say, you know what, this is a better one, and we can cover what we're doing here with this one. But I can't do it without the options. Give me more tools in my toolbox to make the bills pay, plain and simple. So a year ago, I was standing here saying cuts. Sure enough, we did those cuts. We can't do really anymore. And so at this point, now it turns, once you hit that baseline, you turn and you say, all right, I've got a tax. And I might even have to, as much as I dislike the insurance premium tax, I might have to turn and implement that at some point. Not a fan of it, but again, you know, each 1% of that will generate probably $12 million. So the question is if I need $12 million here or there to cover things versus cuts, because I can't cut anymore, I'm going to have to turn to that. But again, with the limited options I have, give me more. Give me the restaurant tax. Give me whatever. Give me the local option, you know, sales tax, things like that we can put towards things. At the end of the day, get your pencils and pens out, figure out what's important, what's not, and then figure out how you're going to pay for it. So thank you all for coming today. I encourage the tough questions. I'm glad to be, standing here a year later arguing for taxes this time, and so I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Brent. Thanks, Stacy. At this time, we need your participation. So, Drew's over there. If you have not submitted questions and you'd like to, just hold them up, and Joe and Drew
Yes.
will come
Joe and
on.
I are circling the room gathering questions, so I'll start off the questions. This question is directed to Mr. Ackerson. The question is, Louisville's developing quite a national reputation as a restaurant capital worth visiting. Why tax and thus discourage growth of this very promising industry?
Well, I think that you're presuming that the tax would discourage growth. Again, I look to other cities that have this tax, and it has not discouraged their growth. Louisville is a great foodie town, but at the end of the day, you know, that's what also makes the idea of it will continue to grow, but this is a great industry to potentially tax, because as that grows and the popularity grows, I don't see it driving away business, especially 1%, 2%, 3%. It hasn't in E-Town. It hasn't in other places. It hasn't in New Orleans or New York City or Orlando. And so the presumption of that, I think, isn't backed up by any provable data. And so it's a risk I'm willing to take, because at the end of the day, any tax is going to be a risk on the city. Any further cuts is a risk upon the city. So I hope that answers that.
And on that same note, as far as how Louisville compares with other cities or other jurisdictions, I'm going to combine a couple of questions here and read them verbatim. And this will go to both of you. So thank you for being here. With Louisville being on the border with Indiana, wouldn't a 3% tax drive business to Indiana? New Albany and Jeffersonville have well-respected restaurants that already draw many visitors from Louisville. That's number one. And then the other question is, do other states have a restaurant tax? If so, what is a typical tax? Can you give us a background of how we compare to other states? How would Kentucky compare to other states, Indiana, Tennessee, or others, if we adopt a tax? Perhaps to Ms. Abrams first, and then we go from there.
Thank you. Can you all hear me? How about now? Is that better? Okay. So I think the first question was, will we drive business to other areas? And I think the answer is yes, even if it's for an undetermined amount of time. I do believe that consumers change their behavior when they're faced with something they don't like. And I think any person in business would tell you the same thing if they're open to the public. I want to address the E-Town comparison, because I think E-Town is a very different city. It's on I-65. Most people that are traveling up and down 65 probably don't research, you know, when they're going to need a potty break or when they're going to need a meal break, and therefore wouldn't necessarily know that there's an extra tax there, as in many other smaller communities. E-Town's kind of one of those asterisk cities as well. When there's a law in the books from the late 80s or early 90s that did allow for a fourth or fifth class city to have a restaurant tax, when you reference the ones that do. And that was done because those smaller communities didn't have a mechanism to fund tourism, right? So those bills and the language that exists today in statute allow for a restaurant tax at those size cities, but it all has to go toward tourism. And we've seen that misused in many ways, you know, for things that are infrastructure or things that are really for the community but not for tourism. So I believe E-Town is technically a third-class city, but somehow scooted through under a fourth-class city when they passed that bill, when they passed that ordinance locally. So anyway, I wanted to address that, and I don't know if I answered the second part of the question.
Councilman Ackerson?
I disagree that we're going to be driving a ton of business over to Indiana. I mean, again, let's just simply think about this. 3%, let's use that number, okay? For the person that's going to go out to a meal, the restaurant of their choosing, you know, the steakhouse or the pasta restaurant, 3% of their meal is not going to drive them across the bridge to choose a different pasta or steakhouse. They're going to pay $2.10 to get across and $4.10, $4.20 to go over and back with the tolls. You say to yourself, if you're the working family that's going to buy that rotisserie chicken at Kroger's, the $10 chicken is now going to cost them $10.30. Are they going to get in their car and drive over to Indiana to save that 30 cents? What they're going to spend in time and gas? No. They're not. I don't see it as being a major factor driving people away. Folks that come in from out of town aren't going to be looking to say, what's the best place to eat, but let's talk taxes, ooh, this steakhouse here sounds great, but if I drive 30 minutes, I can save 3% on my bill. I don't see that happening. For most of the people in this room, you're fortunate, you're affluent. You live in a good house, you've had a good income, Think to yourself real hard, are you going to be going elsewhere just because there's 3% more on the bill? You're not. And I'm left with also the option saying, I need that money to pay for your city services. I'm going to get it on your restaurant bill, or I'm going to get it on potentially your car insurance bill. But I got to get it. So, again, if nothing else, it's an option worth trying. If it doesn't work, repeal it and turn to something else. But we've got to try something. So.
As my questions were related to other jurisdictions, I'm going to do one follow-up, and we'll start with Councilmember Ackerson for this. The questioner has many facts that I'm not aware of are verifiable or not, so I'll count on you to verify these for me. House Bill 470, the restaurant tax bill sponsored by Representative Rob Rothenberger of Shelby County, and the questioner says there was not a single other member of the House to co-sponsor the bill that many council members here in Louisville have been in Frankfort lobbying for. Shelby County, the questioner writes, has had 10 restaurants close and 3 to open in the past year. One of the 3 restaurants to open is also included in the 10 that have closed. So the questioner, and that's the preamble, the question is, why are Metro Council members looking to a Shelby County legislator, Representative Rothenberger, as their leader on this matter?
We've been reaching out to everybody in Frankfort. I mean, the reality of the situation is, the Yum Center ticket surcharge, the 1/4% restaurant tax, those are things that we were talking about last year as things to put into the wheelhouse as options of solutions. Frankfort reached out to us, leadership, and said, hold off on that and see if we can get you some help. We've tried to build, relationships with various folks, but it doesn't seem like it's coming. I mean, House Bill 470, for all practical purposes, I think it's dead on the vine. It's not going to get called up. I mean, the discussion here today, I see some people clapping, so you got your way. But guess what? Then I've got to turn to some other options. And that's all I'm saying is give me 20 options, and I'll choose the 3 best. And then from there, if those 3 aren't the best, then I replace one with something else. But, it's disappointing, And so you clap, but at the end of the day, I'm going to get you one way or the other because that's what I got to do. So, you as the restaurant industry aren't going to get away from this. If I have to increase your insurance premium taxes, that's not going to be something you're going to put on their bill where the consumer is directly paying it. You're going to have to increase your prices, because you're going to have liability insurance. If you're a delivery service, you're going to have auto insurance, a lot of other things. So I'm coming one way or the other, and that sounds terrible, but I've got to, because all of us here want things from the city. You want good police, you want good fire protection, you want EMS, you want your roads paved, and you expect that, and you should. But again, the only way that's going to get paid for is the taxes. So as far as reaching out to anyone else in Frankfort, the administration, they've got folks that go up there and lobby all the time. Metro Council has tried. We've gotten more engaged. For the first year, Metro Council is sending representatives to the League of Cities meetings, both Jefferson counties, League of Cities, and the state League of Cities. So we're doing our darndest to try to work with folks more as a council, not just relying upon the administration, because we recognize the importance of building those relationships and trying to get more people to co-sponsor and try to get some wind in the sails of some sort of help. So, thanks.
Again, we've got 2 questions that are similar in nature, so I'll read them both. Why not tax all retail 1% instead of just the industry? And the second question is, and you may have addressed this a little bit already, but what is being done to work with Frankfort to raise the Kentucky sales tax 1%?
Do you want to, Stacy, jump in at any time.
I think that from our standpoint as a business organization, as a nonprofit, and as a protector and voice of restaurants in the state, anything that's fairly or more equitably distributed among every citizen is favorable to targeting one industry, and as Mr. Ackerson said, those who are maybe affluent that choose to eat out. I disagree with that. I think that as a citizen, even though it would probably mean more dollars for me, although with my job I eat out a lot because I want to support our members, I'm more in favor of something that's equitable and across the board for every single citizen than for one segment of a business. I don't want to hurt our thriving restaurants. I don't think we should look to alter the behavior of people that dine out specifically as a population. So personally, I'm in favor of that. I'm not crazy about the local option sales tax, or as we call it, LOST, because I think that there are a lot of things that could go awry there. But I am in favor of, if necessary, a higher sales tax if that's the way everybody goes. But I think the difference is that it has to be equitable. It can't target one industry.
The targeting of an industry, I mean, first of all, most folks in this room have probably heard the term NIMBY, not in my backyard, when planning and zoning, taxes are the same thing. Every industry says, it's a great idea, we need money to do this or do that, but go tax somebody else. The liquor industry says tax the food industry. The food industry says tax the car industry. The car industry says tax the grocery industry. Everybody says somebody else. And at the end of the day, I would love to have the ability to do a 1% sales and tax increase. You're absolutely correct. Then it's across the board. It's also a consumer-driven option. You know that you're going to be spending 1% more. It would allow me to generate a lot more money for that 1% because it would affect items across the board versus the restaurant. But I don't have that option. Frankfurt, give us that option. Give us that ability. We'll put that in the wheelhouse. But the restaurant is the only option I have right now because that's all that Frankfurt is willing to even consider. And as I said, it's dead on the vine. That's the reality. But, I'm not a state legislator. If you want more options, contact your state legislature. Work with the Kentucky League of Cities and other organizations to say, give places like Louisville the ability to do this. But until I have that ability, the only thing, I'm here to talk about restaurant tax because that's the only option I have. That's the only thing on the table, and I'll take whatever options I can get to help me with the problem that we have. Thanks, Joe.
Following up, and some of these questions certainly address some things you've already mentioned, such as how it impacts local businesses, but this questioner also asks about convention business, stating we are already paying one of the highest sales taxes on our entire bill. Will this tax affect convention business? Is there any kind of digestion, if pardon the pun, of how this would affect, or do the conventioneers, people who come into town, look at this kind of tax base and base their decisions upon whether to bring a convention to town?
Stacy, you're probably more knowledgeable on that. I mean, I don't have, I'd be guessing,
I would be guessing too, but I know that when, for instance, Louisville Tourism works with groups that are coming to the city, I know that they present them packages, and part of that package is, this is our hotel tax, because there already is a transient room tax that is largely upon tourists, really. That's the case there, because we're not renting rooms typically in our own community. But they present a whole proposal to attract business to our area, to our city, and to our convention center and the Fair and Expo Center. And so part of that is a breakdown of what local taxes apply.
And a follow-up on that, in the same way there is a bed tax for out-of-towners who sleep in Louisville hotels, is there any way to tax the out-of-town diners to pay this tax instead of local citizens?
No, I'm not an expert on federal law, but I believe that violates, interstate commerce and other things. I'd leave that to Judge Cunningham, who's acknowledging, we'd be in some serious trouble. But, but if it were legal, I would like to have it in my wheelhouse.
Great. So this question is to both panelists. Comment is, 140 Kentucky cities currently have authority to have restaurant tax. Questions are, why should Louisville be denied, and why should Louisville lose tourist dollars in this area?
I think it's great. Stacy, I'm going to let you go ahead and go, but I think it's great. It's very simple. You're absolutely correct. Why should Louisville be denied the same opportunities that other cities have? Home rule. We as Louisville should be able to have those choices. Either put it on the ballot for referendum. Let your Metro Council vote on it. If you don't like the way we vote on it, vote us out of office. Vote somebody else in that's going to be on the mindset that you're on. But that gives you the power as a community to make these decisions. It's not the mayor, it's not me, Brent Ackerson, it's not the council. If you don't like a tax that we vote in, you vote us out. If you don't like the cuts that we've made to government, you vote me out and bring somebody else in that you think can do a better job. So ultimately, the decision on these taxes and everything else, this is about empowering you, giving you, the community, the possibility. And why should you not have the same possibilities that other cities in in Kentucky have? So, Stacy?
The reason why Louisville shouldn't and Lexington shouldn't and any larger city shouldn't is the statute that I referenced earlier. The only reason that ever crossed anybody's mind was for those smaller cities to have the ability to raise money to draw tourists or visitors to their area. Okay, that's where it all originated, and it was confined to that. And it's supposed to be used only for those tourism purposes, okay? So restaurants didn't create the pension issue. We don't get pensions, trust me. Nobody in the restaurant business has a pension unless it's their second or third career. We didn't create that issue. We didn't not save money for a rainy day. We didn't plan our budget and not stay within it. We should not be the answer for it. That's my answer.
Joe, and this is directed at you clappers in the room on that issue, and that is this, is you're right. You know, none of us here created that pension bill, but it's not going away. It's here to stay. You know, I don't view this as poor management on your city's part. You know, we didn't expect a bill like this to come. It's Frankfurt. But it is here, and we can't deny that. And again, you know, you say, well, the restaurant industry shouldn't pay. Well, then let's none of us pay. You know, but how do you, the restaurant industry, feel when I don't pave the street in front of you? You know, or it's unsafe for folks to walk into your doors because I don't have enough police to patrol the areas, or, you know, fire issues or EMS issues or anything else. You know, that's going to affect you also. The way I view it is you know, the restaurant industry, I'm sorry to say, but you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't, until more options are on the table. And right now, again, according to Frankfurt, you're the only option that I've potentially got. So I don't like taxing the Yum Center. 10% surcharge there. But again, it's the only option that I've got at the moment. And I've got to exercise options to restore some of the services that we cut to the bone.
This question is directed to Ms. Roof. You said during your remarks there are better options to raise revenue. Can you name them?
No, and I said I didn't have the answer because my job is to voice for restaurants. I don't know what those better options are, but just because it's easy, as Mayor Fisher said, doesn't mean it's right. There have got to be more wide-sweeping things that would not target an industry or a segment of consumers. So no, I don't, and I said that in my remarks.
And Stacy, I would agree with you. The use of the word easy is a bad, you know, no tax is easy because it's going to hurt people, you know. So easy was a poor choice of words.
Low-hanging fruit.
Low-hanging fruit is a poor choice of words. At this point, as far as I'm concerned, it's the only fruit on the table, you know. I don't have a fruit bowl. I got an apple. That's it. So, but to call it low-hanging fruit, I would disagree with you, though, on this. I do think that it's a lesser tax than, again, back to the insurance premium tax, because I represent a lot of poor people and, you know, who at the end of the day are not dining at your restaurants. They're eating bologna sandwiches and grilled cheese sandwiches and staying home and stretching their dollars as much as they can. And so at the end of the day, I'd rather get in my pocketbook, and unfortunately, a lot of you sitting in this room, pocketbook, when we choose to go out to eat versus hitting my poor constituents who are already, you know, can't, based upon the wages and the minimum wage out there, they're not able to pay their bills already. So, you know, again, I have to choose who I'm going to hurt, because some of us are going to hurt, period.
Well, a lot of those people are our workers, you know, or the hourly employees that everybody seems to want the wages to go up for, who I believe the hourly wages will see a hit if something like this takes place. Because people only, in their mind, they know what they're going to spend. They have an idea how much they're going to spend on a meal out. If that exceeds it, psychology in our brains, whether we choose it or not, tells us to decrease the tip a little bit, right? Or go less frequently. And that directly affects the workforce, which we're already struggling to keep and get. So,
We have time for one more question. This is the last one. Again, combining two questions. The first one stated is, why are we promoting a regressive tax which will disproportionately impact the poor? And again, this question is there a restaurant tax regressive? If so, should the city be looking to other revenue? This is for Mr. Ackerson, how do you reconcile your support for this with your opposition to the insurance premium tax?
Well, I think earlier we talked about that. The insurance premium tax affects poor people directly. They don't have an option. You know, their automobile insurance. And think about also, automobile insurance is driven by your zip code you live in. So you take a car that's in the 40223 zip code and you move it down to the exact same driver, exact same automobile, you know, same driving history, and you move them down to the 40205 or the 40211. Their insurance rates are higher, which means that tax is a percent. So, you know, their homeowners insurance, because again, the crime in the area and other things. So it's not, you know, the regressive tax is the insurance premium tax. The restaurant tax is more of a progressive tax. You know, you look at, you know, the Republican council members. They would agree, you know, they're supportive of the Yum Center tax. They're supportive of the restaurant tax because they view it as more of a progressive tax. I don't want to turn this into, is a Democrat right or Republican right? You know, if we can all agree upon what's the path of least resistance that hurts the fewest people to get us the money we need to make the best society we can, you know, I don't care who the idea comes from. And I don't care that, you know, a Republican and I are agreeing upon something. Let's just agree upon something and get it done. You know, to not do anything is the worst of all. The fears here, the fears there, we won't know until we implement something like this. And then sit back a year or two later and figure out how much it generates and who is it hurting. And again, I would love to be one of the few politicians that says, you know, let's repeal a tax and try something different if it's not working well or if there's a better option out there. But the only way that can happen is you got to give me a lot of options. And you've also got to be willing to give me and my colleagues the chance to take some risks, analyze the data, and then come back and say, was this a good choice or bad choice? Should we change directions? But to do nothing, well, that's the worst option of all at this time. So.
I think it's a regressive tax in that you'll hear a lot of language, especially in Frankfurt, that we need to move toward more consumption-based taxes, which really tie into consumers spending their money and what we choose to spend our money on, whether it's filling up our gas, you know, in our cars or putting food in our bodies, whatever it is, whatever we consume. You hear a lot of legislators talk about we need to move toward a consumption-based tax. The issue with that, and the issue that I have with that is it's fine if you do that across the board, but then you're targeting specific industries because we don't all consume the same things and in the same way, right? It also really doesn't do away with what's already in place. It just adds to it, okay? So when you hear tax modernization, to me, it's just saying tax expansion because it's giving you more tools in the toolbox and it's giving you more latitude to make decisions. But when is the last time that you ever saw a tax repealed or not utilized if the permission was given? That sounds wonderful, and I would love as a citizen to see that. It's just not typically the way it works.
You're correct, it hasn't. But that's what's exciting about the fact that mindsets can change. You know, we can't just tax because we have the ability. You know, you give me 10%, I'll take the full 10%. And what I don't need this year, that's fine, I'll spend it on something else. That's one of the reasons I also opposed the insurance premium tax. When the administration came to me, they said, we're going to be $35 million short next year. We're going to tax. And I said, how much is it going to generate? And they said, $60 million. I said, well, what are you going to do with the other 25? Don't worry, we'll do something good with it. That's what's gotten us in the hole we're in now. We should only tax at this point what we need. It shouldn't just be turned into a spending spree. Because at the end of the day, more problems are going to come up. There might be another thing that's a pension problem down the road. And I don't want to use everything in my wheelhouse now and have my hands tied later. You know, if you give me 3% on restaurant tax, maybe I'll only tax 1 to 1.5%. Because I want to keep the other 1.5% to 2% in my backup. So the next major issue that hits the city, I know I have a solution. So.
Any last words?
No, thank you all for your attention.
Okay, and thanks to both of you guys for being here today. And we hope you'll come back, not necessarily as panelists, but maybe just to sit in the audience. It's a little easier out there. So come back sometime if you would. Our next meeting is going to be Wednesday, of course, April 8th. And for that program, we're in the process of putting together a panel, securing a panel of community leaders who can discuss local preparedness when it comes to infectious diseases and coronavirus. At this time, the panel includes Amy Hess, who recently joined Metro Louisville as its Chief of Public Services, and she oversees city's emergency services. And we've got a couple other community leaders that I would not be premature to announce right now, but looks like a pretty good panel of leaders who are sort of in the trenches right now on that issue that can join us next week. So as soon as that all comes together, we will email out invitations, and we will update the website as well. Reservations can be made online at louisvilleforum.org or by calling our voicemail at 329-0111. Thank you.